I still remember that moment with absolute clarity. Inside the freezing cold reading room, where everyone was dressed as if they were attending a victory celebration, the lawyer slid something toward me across the table. A single dollar. Not 1,000, not 100, $1. His
He
son
actually thought
burst
he'd
out
get
laughing.
something.
The daughter-in-law turned away, hiding her smile behind the curve of her lips.
What a
The
joke.
grandson shook his head, as if everything had just been confirmed. I was nothing more than excess. I said nothing. I had long grown used to being dismissed. But when I picked that coin up, I realized something no one else in that room could see. And in that very moment, I knew the game was not over. If you've ever been looked down on simply because you stayed quiet, if you've ever been humiliated in front of others and expected to swallow it to keep the peace, stay with me until the end of this story. Before we continue, leave a comment and tell me the city and country you're watching from, and hit like and subscribe so you don't miss stories where justice doesn't arrive with noise, but arrives with the truth. My name is Lorraine Parker. I am 67 years old, a widow. I live alone in a small house on the outskirts of Savannah, Georgia, where mornings usually begin with birdsong and end in silence. For the last 14 years of his life, Harold Whitmore was the only man who came in and out of that house with me, not as family, but as someone I cared for every single day. I gave him his medication on time. I read the newspaper aloud when his eyes grew weak. I sat beside his bed on nights he couldn't sleep, just so he would know he wasn't alone. Harold passed away in October of 2025. He left quietly, without long instructions or final speeches. He simply held my hand tightly and then let go. I was used to not having my name mentioned in important moments, so I did not expect to be mentioned in the will. The reading took place in a law office in downtown Savannah, a cold, polished space, the scent of varnished wood mixed with stale coffee. I arrived early and chose Sheh, the seat farthest away. My hands rested neatly on my lap. I told myself, Lorraine, don't expect anything. The door opened. Grant Whitmore, 45, walked in first. An expensive suit, the confident stride of a man who knew he was about to win. Behind him came Melissa, his wife, her lips slightly curved as if rehearsed in front of a mirror. Last was Dylan, 19, Harold's grandson, headphones in his ears, eyes drifting around as though everything here was too small for him. They did not greet me. There was no need. In their world, I had never truly been there. The lawyer began reading. Grant Whitmore inherits $6 million US. Grant leaned back in his chair, lips pressed together in satisfaction. Melissa squeezed her husband's hand lightly, exhaling as if a burden had finally been lifted. Melissa Whitmore, $2 million. Dylan Whitmore, an investment fund valued at $1.5 million. Dylan smirked. He glanced at me, the look passing over me the way one looks at an old object left behind. I remained still, not offended, not surprised, just quietly counting the rhythm of my own heartbeat. Then the lawyer paused, turned another page. Lorraine Parker. The room fell silent for a very brief moment, so brief I almost thought I had misheard. The inheritance, $1 US, not 1,000, not 100, $1. The lawyer slid a thin envelope toward me, so light I thought a gust of wind could have carried it away. Grant chuckled openly, not bothering to hide it. That makes sense, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. She was just hired help. Melissa turned her face away, but I clearly saw the corner of her mouth lift. Dylan added, drawing laughter from the room, "What can $1 buy? A mint candy?" The laughter rang out, short, sharp, pleased. It felt like being slapped, not with a hand, but with the eyes of people who believed they were right. I said nothing. I opened the envelope and took out the single dollar bill. My fingers trembled ever so slightly, but I held it firmly. I did not let them see. Then I looked closer. Along the edge of the bill, near the serial number, there was a very small engraving. It did not look like a random scratch. It looked intentional. My heart beat a little harder. I folded the envelope, placed the bill back inside, and stood up. "You don't have anything to say?" Grant asked, his tone half curious, half mocking. I looked straight at him. "No," I said slowly. "I think that's enough." I walked out, my back straight. Behind me, their voices echoed in the hallway, not bothering to lower themselves. At least we didn't have to share with her. Total waste of time. Let's go celebrate. I didn't turn back. I sat in my car and closed the door, letting the silence settle around me. Under the yellow parking lot, lights, I took the dollar out again and slowly turned it between my fingers. That engraving. The longer I looked, the more certain I became. It was not accidental. And for the first time since Harold died, I felt something unfamiliar. Not pain, not anger, but clarity. I drove out of the parking lot that day very slowly, not because I was shaken, but because a familiar sentence from Harold kept echoing in my mind, one I had never fully understood before. What truly matters, Lorraine, is usually found where people don't bother to look. I had heard him say that many times, when speaking about people, when speaking about money, when speaking about truth. And now I was holding a $1 bill that no one in that will reading room had bothered to look at twice. I didn't go home right away. I turned toward River Street to a small collectibles shop Harold had taken me to years ago. An old place, its wooden sign faded. Inside, the air smelled of aged metal and yellowed paper. The owner was Mr. Kellerman, 72 years old. He looked up as I walked in, squinted at me for a moment, then nodded in greeting as if he had seen me somewhere before. "I need to ask you about this," I said, placing the dollar on the counter. Sol picked it up, indifferent at first, but within seconds, I saw his expression change completely. He tilted the bill under the light, turned it over and back again, then looked up at me, this time without the polite distance. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice lowered. "From a will reading," I replied. "Harold Whitmore's." Mr. Kellerman was silent for a long moment. Then he set the bill down and pointed at the tiny mark along its edge. "This isn't a scratch," he said. "It's a locator mark." A chill ran up my spine. He put on his reading glasses and leaned closer. "Look carefully. These grooves, they form a sequence, like coordinates." He grabbed a pen and quickly wrote on a scrap of paper, H14. "Safe deposit box," he continued. "Old style, rare, and no one carves marks like this unless they're very careful." I didn't need to ask who he meant. In my mind, Harold's image appeared so clearly I could almost hear his voice. I slipped the dollar back into my pocket, thanked Mr. Kellerman, and left. My heart beat steadily, but each beat felt firmer than the last. The next destination came to me naturally, the bank on Bull Street, where Harold had done business for decades. A gray stone building, stern and unpretentious, just like him. The branch manager was Evelyn Ross, 59 years old. She stepped out from behind the counter, her smile professional and measured. "Miss Parker, how can I help you?" she asked. I didn't go in circles. I placed the dollar on the table between us. "Harold Whitmore left this to me," I said. "I believe he wanted you to see it." Evelyn leaned forward, her expression calm, until her eyes caught the engraving. I saw the exact moment. She straightened, no longer leaning back in her chair, both hands placed neatly on the desk. "Miss Parker," she said quietly. Her tone changed. "I need you to come with me to a private room with city. Door closed behind us. Evelyn locked it. No rush, no tension, but very deliberate. "Harold left a private deposit vault," she said. It exists outside the will, outside standard inheritance procedures. I swallowed. We were instructed, she continued, to open it only when the bearer of the verification mark appeared. She looked directly at me. And you are the first. Evelyn opened the vault. Inside there was no glittering gold like in the movies, just documents, a lot of documents, printed emails, charitable fund contracts, expense reports, and one neatly folded sheet of paper placed on top. Evelyn handed it to me. I opened it. If Lorraine arrives, it means she was humiliated exactly as I expected. My hand tightened around the paper, not from pain, but from being seen. Harold had known. He knew they would laugh. He knew they would look down on me. And he knew I would be the only one patient enough to look closely at a single dollar. There's one more thing in the vault, Evelyn said. Something that could change the entire inheritance. She placed two documents in front of me. One is identity verification. The other is a confidentiality agreement. If you sign, she said slowly, there's no turning back. I took the pen. My hand trembled, but not from fear. I signed. And for the first time since the will reading, I knew one thing for certain. They had ended my story far too early. I left the bank as the afternoon light began to fade. The gray stone doors closed behind me, and inside my handbag was something heavier than any number. Truth. I didn't drive right away. I sat in the car, turned off the engine, and let the silence settle. Then I opened the envelope Evelyn had given me and took out the handwritten letter Harold had left behind. Thick paper, familiar handwriting, slow, deliberate, as if each line had been written with care. Lorraine, they will laugh when you receive $1. I want you to hear that laughter so you know you were never imagining it. I didn't cry out loud. My tears fell the way an old person's do, quiet, deep, painful without noise. I remembered the will reading room, the dismissive looks, the short, sharp laughter like a hammer striking my chest. Harold had known. Not only had he known, he had placed me exactly where I needed to be to see them for who they truly were. I kept reading. Harold wrote about the MTST Charitable Foundation, the projects he had built over many years, the contributions he believed were meant to reach the right places. Then the rhythm of his words changed, slower, heavier. I suspect Grant and Melissa have treated the foundation like a personal account. Unusual management fees, vague contracts. I did not confront them early because the greedy only reveal themselves when they believe they've already won. I took a deep breath. The pieces began to fall into place. The urgency, the showmanship, the way they had entered the will reading as if they were arriving to collect a trophy. At the end of the letter, Harold wrote the line that made me sit up straight. 18 million is not a reward, Lorraine. It is a shield. Use it to restore the foundation, and use it to protect yourself. I folded the letter. I understood now. This was not money meant to be spent. It was responsibility, and it was a trap for the greedy. I had just started the engine when my phone vibrated. The name on the screen, Grant Whitmore. I let it ring for one more beat before answering. Lorraine. His voice was sweet to the point of being false. Are you all right? The family would like to invite you to dinner. Talk things through properly. I stared through the windshield, catching my reflection, calmer than I expected. I'm busy, I said. Enjoy your dinner. There was a second of silence on the line, then a soft laugh. You've always been so direct. I always have, I replied. You just never paid attention. I ended the call. That evening, the neighborhood was unusually quiet. My Savannah suburb rarely had much noise, but around 8 o'clock, there was a knock at the door. Not polite, the kind that demands. I opened it. Grant stood there, still in his suit, Melissa beside him, wearing the familiar scent of her perfume. Dylan leaned against the porch column, smirking. "We need to talk," Grant Timoa said, stepping inside as if the house belonged to him too. "You're trespassing," I said. My voice wasn't raised, but it was clear. Melissa sighed and raised her hands. "Lorraine, don't make this difficult. We're just worried about you." I closed the door, turned back, and looked at them standing in my small living room. 3 loud presences in a space that had grown used to quiet. Grant got straight to the point. "We know Harold left you something outside the will." Melissa followed, her tone indulgent. "You're old. Why burden yourself with money? Let the family manage it. We'll make sure you're taken care of." Dylan laughed with open contempt. "A nurse thinking she can handle millions?" I looked at each of them, not angry, just remembering. "I don't owe anyone an explanation for my life," I said, "especially not people who only show up when they think I have something they want." Grant smiled, but his eyes turned cold. He placed a thick stack of papers on the coffee table. "If you don't cooperate," he said slowly, "we'll sue." I stepped closer and met his gaze. "Go ahead." The air thickened. Melissa blinked rapidly. Dylan stopped laughing. Grant curled his lip. "You think you've won?" "I think," I replied. "You're used to winning too easily." I took a copy of the agreement from my bag. Just the first page, enough for them to see the title. Trust, confidentiality, ethical clauses. Any intimidation or legal dispute, I said, automatically triggers an internal investigation of the foundation. And I paused at the right moment. It may directly affect your share. Grant's face drained of color for a split second. Just a split second. But I saw it. "Are you threatening us?" Dylan snapped. "No," I answered. "I'm reminding you of the rules." They stood there for a few seconds. Then Grant jerked his chin toward the door. "We'll be back," he said. I opened the door. "I'm sure you will." When the door closed, the house returned to silence. I stood alone, resting my hand on the table, this hand that had once taken pulses, administered injections, wiped sweat from other people's brows. This time my hand was steady. Harold had been right. The greedy only reveal themselves when they believe they've already won, and I had just placed them in front of a mirror they could not avoid. After the night they left my house, nothing became louder. It grew quiet in a filthy way. Anonymous phone calls, avoided glances in charitable circles, whispers wrapped in false concern. I heard she took advantage of an old man, a caregiver who managed to manipulate a will. They say she's very smooth with words. Grant and Melissa didn't sue. They waited. They planted doubt the way others plant seeds, not needing to see the harvest, only needing the soil to be contaminated. Then the invitation arrived. The annual fundraising gala at the DeSoto Hotel. Grant's name sat at the top of the sponsor list. The local press was fully invited. Lights, cameras, stage, everything prepared for a story to be told their way. The goal was clear. Force me to appear. And if I didn't appear, they would say I was hiding. If I did appear, they would disgrace me. I read the invitation, folded it, and set it on the table. I didn't need long to decide. "I'll go," I told my attorney, Marianne Holt. She looked at me, calm but sharp. "Then we go the right way." That evening, I entered the DeSoto ballroom not alone. On my left was Marianne, 53, in a dark suit, eyes steady and unblinking. On my right was an independent auditor, the one who had sat with me for hours aligning every number. People who had avoided my gaze suddenly turned to look. Some were surprised, some curious, some had believed the rumors, but not enough to hold my eyes for long. Grant stood on the stage, bright suit, microphone in hand, a carefully rehearsed look of grief. "My father," he said, his voice low, "was a good man, but in his final years, he grew weak. And when people are at their weakest, they are most easily exploited. A murmur swept through the room. I heard whispers behind me. Oh my God, who is she? Is that the caregiver? Grant paused at the exact beat, then looked down at me. Lorraine, he called my name before hundreds of people. Do you have anything you'd like to say? This was the moment they had prepared, the moment of public humiliation, the moment I was expected to fumble, to explain, to cry. I stood, not rushed, not trembling. I walked onto the stage and stopped an arm's length from Grant. I looked out at the room, familiar and unfamiliar faces, eyes that had already judged me before hearing a single word. I only want to ask one question, I said, my voice slow, steady, not needing the microphone to strain. If everything is clean, why are you afraid of an audit? The room froze. Grant forced a smile. This is not the time. Marianne stepped forward one pace. Actually, she said, her voice level and cold, this is exactly the time. The screen behind the stage lit up. Not images, not video, numbers, transfer records, unusual spikes in management fees, payments to consulting companies registered under CE. Melissa's relatives. No one breathed loudly. No one whispered. Only the hum of the air conditioning and the slow crawl of numbers across the screen. I didn't curse. I didn't boast. I said only one sentence and sentence. The one Harold had taught me. I don't need anyone to believe me emotionally. I only need them to look at the numbers. Melissa went pale. Dylan looked around, no longer smiling. Grant lunged forward, reaching for the microphone. Stop this, he shouted, his voice suddenly high. Marianne didn't raise her voice. She spoke just clearly enough for the microphone to catch every word. You have just incriminated yourself in front of witnesses. Please remain where you are. 1 beat, 2 beats. Grant stood still, not because he obeyed, but because the entire room had seen what he could no longer hide. I stood there under the lights, without raising my voice. I didn't win by shouting. I won by timing. And when I stepped down from the stage, no one dared to laugh anymore. I left the DeSoto Hotel in Shentz. No one stopped me. No one dared to ask more. The eyes that once looked at me as an outsider now slid away, avoiding me, as if I had just stepped out of a place they didn't want to remember ever standing in. The next morning, the news spread faster than I expected. The Foundation's board opened an investigation. Then came the Financial Crimes Unit. Numbers do not lie. And once they were exposed to the public, every excuse became unnecessary. My phone began to ring, again and again. The name on the screen was familiar, Grant Whitmore. I let it vibrate, then vibrate again, then vibrate some more. Messages poured in, their tone shifting by the minute. Lorraine, we can talk. There's no need to make this bigger. What do you want? We can negotiate. I replied only once. You already chose how to treat me. Then I blocked the number. That afternoon, Melissa came. No warning, no appointment. She stood at my door, her face stripped of its usual polish. Her eyes were red, her hands trembling, her voice hoarse from crying. Lorraine, she said the moment I opened the door. You're old. Do you really want to drag the whole family down? I looked at her for a long moment. No anger, no pity. No, I said. I just refuse to drag myself down any further. Melissa pressed her lips together, tears falling. You don't understand. Grant will lose everything. No, I replied. He's only losing what he never deserved to keep. She stood there for a few seconds, as if waiting for me to soften. I didn't. At last, she turned away and hurried down the steps, no trace left of the woman who once handed me pity as if it were kindness. A few days later, I ran into Dylan. He was standing outside an office building, gripping his phone, his face flushed with anger. "You went too far," he snapped, not bothering to greet me. "My scholarship fund got cut, all because of those stupid ethics clauses." I looked at him, the grandson who had laughed in my face at the will reading. "You call this too far," I said slowly, "because you've never had to endure humiliation just to survive." Dylan started to argue. Then he stopped. Perhaps for the first time he couldn't find words that would let him win. The climax didn't arrive with applause. It arrived with decisions. Grant was forced off the board. His assets were frozen pending investigation. The people who had laughed at the will reading, the ones who had looked away, now bowed their heads to me with caution. I didn't smile back. I didn't need to. I don't enjoy cruel victories. I enjoy the feeling of standing upright. I used the trust exactly as Harold had written. I rebuilt the foundation, published every expense with transparency, invited independent audits, regularly, publicly, and I established a nursing scholarship program in the name of Harold Whitmore. In its description, I added a single line, small, unbolded, without ornament, for those who do quiet work. People like me, people who were once looked down on because they didn't speak up. That evening, I returned home. I brewed a pot of tea, sat down in the old chair by the window, the one Harold used to sit in. Outside, Savannah was calm. This time, the silence was no longer abandonment. It was freedom. After everything that has happened, I understand one thing with absolute clarity. Justice does not always arrive with a loud voice or through dramatic confrontations. Sometimes, justice arrives very quietly, when the truth is placed where it belongs, and when those who once believed they had the right to look down on others are forced to face the consequences of their own choices. I believe in God, and I believe He does not teach us to endure injustice just to preserve a false sense of peace. He teaches us to keep our dignity, to keep our clarity, and to stand firm in the truth, even when that truth makes others uncomfortable. Faith does not make me weaker. Faith gives me the clarity to know what is right and the courage to refuse to bow before contempt. If you are listening to this story and see a reflection of yourself somewhere within it, being overlooked, pushed to the margins, told to stay silent, to keep the peace, I hope you remember one thing. God sees everything, not to punish hastily, but to place each thing where it truly belongs, at the right time, in the right way. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs to be reminded that they are not weak. Leave a comment and tell me where you're watching from. And if you believe in stories where justice comes through truth rather than noise, subscribe to the channel and walk with me through the stories to come. May God bless everyone who is listening, granting strength to those who are facing injustice, so they may stand upright, and granting peace to those who were once looked down upon, so they may reclaim the peace they truly deserve.